In a quiet village where secrets fester like wounds beneath the skin, there lived a man whose charm could melt stone. Women adored him. Elders warned against him. And yet, none could resist his voice or the mystery behind his smile. He made promises like rain during a drought, until 5 women found themselves heavy with child, and one stood dressed in white, waiting at the altar. But he never came. This is the tale of Ekene, the man who played with fate, and disappeared before fate could play with him. In the southeastern hills of Ogwashi village, where the wind speaks through the baobab trees and the old women watch with knowing eyes, there was a man named Ekene. Tall skin like polished mahogany, and eyes that flickered like candlelight in a shrine. Ekene was a man both feared and admired. He was the only son of Motsi Onwachekwa, the village's late palm wine tapper, who died under mysterious circumstances. Some said a spirit followed him home one night. Others said it was Ekene's doing, that he wanted his father gone, so he could be free to walk his own path. But Ekene was no ordinary man. At just 29 he had no farmland, no trade, no apprenticeship. Yet he lived well, dressed sharp, ate richly, and always had cowries to spare. Nobody knew exactly where he got his wealth. Some whispered it came from women. Others believed he had dealings with the Umumuo, the unseen ones. What everyone agreed on was this: Ekene was dangerous in the way honey is dangerous to ants. The first woman was Nkiru, the daughter of the town's market leader. A bright girl, strong-willed, with laughter that filled a room. She had refused all suitors for years, until Ekene spoke to her one night after evening prayers. His voice was low, deliberate. "You carry the sun in your chest, Nkiru. I would follow your light, even into the forest of spirits." No one knew what he said after that, but 3 months later, Nkiru was heavy with child. Her mother wailed when she found out. Her father offered to pay anyone who would force Ekene to marry her. But Ekene only smiled. "Love is not a debt," he said. "It is a gift, sometimes given only once." Next was Adiz, the village seamstress, who often stayed up late to finish wedding garments. Ekene began sitting outside her workshop, pretending to admire the stars, asking questions like, "Do you think the spirits wear white like brides?" 2 moons later she too was with child. Then came Onyanai, the widow of the palm kernel merchant. Lonely, gentle, and barely 30, Ekene helped carry her firewood once. The next week he helped carry her shame. The whispers grew louder. "Is this man under a spell?" "No," one old woman said. "He is the spell." Chinyu was the priest's daughter, untouched and feared by many. But Ekene wasn't afraid of shrines. In fact, he visited the sacred grove more often than the priest himself. He met Chinyu there under the moon, surrounded by the sounds of crickets and the soft hum of ancient spirits. When Chinyu fell pregnant, the priest locked her indoors for days. "You have desecrated the shrine," he roared. "The gods will not forgive this." But Chinyu just wept and said, "Ekene is the god I chose." Her name was Amarachi, God's grace, the most beautiful girl in Ogwashi, and the only daughter of the village chief. Educated, soft-spoken, yet brave. No one believed Amarachi would fall for Ekene. She had studied in the city. She spoke English like a queen. She wore ankara skirts and leather handbags. She knew better. Or so they thought. But love, as the elders say, does not respect wisdom. Ekene told her one day by the river, "I have wandered many roads, but I was only walking toward you." 3 months later, a wedding was planned. The whole village buzzed like market day. The 5 women, swollen with Ekene's legacy, watched in silence as Amarachi was fitted for a gown of white and gold. The sun rose like fire that morning. The drummers played early. The goats were slaughtered. The kola nuts were broken. Amarachi wore coral beads and smiled with tears in her eyes. But Ekene never came. Not at dawn. Not at noon. Not at dusk. And as the sun sank behind the mango trees, a cold wind passed through Ogwashi, a wind that made even the oldest ancestors tremble in their graves. No one had seen Ekene since the night before. His compound was untouched, his clothes still on the line. Even his beloved carved staff leaned against the door, as if waiting for its master to return. The chief sent young men to search the nearby towns. Others searched the forest, the river, the paths to the shrine. Nothing. No blood. No prints. No body. Just absence. Kiru gave birth that week. Boy. Adis followed days later, a girl. Then Unyanai, Chinyu, and finally Amarachi. All bore children who looked exactly like Ekene. Same sharp jaw. Same stormy eyes. Same dimple on the left cheek. But none of them could explain who he really was. Or where he went. Some claimed he'd been taken by spirits for defiling sacred bonds. Others whispered he was never a man at all, but a wandering soul sent to test the village's women. The old women simply shook their heads. This is not the end, they said. This is only the beginning. In the weeks that followed Ekene's disappearance, each of the 5 women gave birth, one by one, as though orchestrated by some unseen force. Each child, though unique in their own way, bore a striking resemblance to Ekene. Sharp, deep-set eyes that seemed to look right through you, a dark sheen to their skin, and most unsettling of all, a dimple on the left cheek. The villagers began calling them the children of the shadow. But they were not ordinary children. Nkiru's son, named Chijiok, was the first to be born. His arrival sent waves through the village. Nkiru had always been known for her strength, but her pregnancy was a difficult one. Many feared for her life, as she grew thinner and paler with each passing month. When she finally gave birth, she was greeted with relief, but also awe. Chijiok, though only days old, displayed an unusual gift. His small hands, soft and delicate, seemed to glow in the presence of sick or wounded animals. On the morning after his birth, Nkiru's cousin, Ngozi, brought a sick goat to the house. The animal had been limping for days and refused to eat. Nkiru, desperate, placed the animal next to her son. To everyone's shock, within an hour, the goat rose on its legs, no longer crippled, and began grazing as though it had never been ill. Chijiok's eyes, those deep, mysterious eyes, never left the goat. It was as though he understood something no one else did. And thus he was called Chijiok the healer, and people began coming from far and wide, seeking him out for cures. Adi's daughter Ngozi was the second to be born. From the moment she opened her eyes, people noticed something strange about her. Her gaze was intense, almost predatory, as though she was searching for something beyond the veil of reality. One evening, as Adis was walking with Ngozi through the village, a strange thing occurred. The child, just a few months old, stopped and looked directly at an old man who had been sitting by the road. His name was Yuzo, and he was known for his wisdom and his ability to talk to the ancestors. Ngozi reached out her small hand and whispered a word no one could hear. The old man froze, his eyes widening in shock. He whispered back to the child, and for a moment, Adis could swear she saw the child smile knowingly. That night, Yuzo visited Adis and confessed, "Your daughter. She speaks to the ancestors. She can hear their voices. They are calling to her." The village began to murmur. Ngozi the Whisperer was born, a child who could commune with spirits, a gift that terrified and fascinated everyone in equal measure. Unyanai's son, Chikwudi, was a different story altogether. His birth was unlike the others. Unyanai had given birth in the dead of night, under a storm so fierce that it seemed to shake the earth itself. Lightning flashed across the sky as Chikwudi came into the world. From the very first day, something about him seemed wrong. He rarely cried, but when he did, his cries were chilling like the wail of a lost soul. The village children were afraid of him, running away whenever he came near. But it wasn't just the children. The animals in the village avoided Chikwudi, even the birds that would normally greet the morning with songs. 3 months old, something strange happened. Chikwudi crawled into the shade of an ancient fig tree, and there, in the darkness, he lay still for hours. The trees swayed unnaturally, and the birds that had been perched nearby fled in fright. When he finally awoke, the ground around the tree was scorched, as though touched by fire. Rumors spread quickly. Chukwudi the Shadow, a child who brought darkness in his wake, a child who could control the elements. Chinyu's daughter Ifeananya was born under strange circumstances. Her birth coincided with the rising of the full moon, and for 3 days the moon never set. The villagers believed that Ifeananya was destined for something extraordinary. From the moment she was born, Ifeananya's eyes were like twin mirrors, reflecting not just the world around her, but something far beyond it. Her mother noticed that the child would stare at the sky for hours, her tiny hands reaching out as if to touch the stars. As she grew, Ifeananya began to show signs of something uncanny. She could predict the future. She told her mother that a great storm would come to Ogwashi, and it did, flooding the river and destroying the crops. She foretold the death of Matsio Koro, the village elder, just days before it happened. The villagers began calling her Ifeananya the seer, a child who could see what was hidden, who could look into the future as easily as one might look at a familiar face. Amarachi's son, Okachukwu, was perhaps the most mysterious of them all. Unlike the others, Okachukwu was not born with strange powers or eerie abilities. He was simply perfect, handsome, strong, and intelligent beyond his years. But there was one thing that set him apart. At the age of 2, Okachukwu began to speak words of wisdom beyond his age. He spoke of kings of lands far beyond Ogwashi, and of a great lineage that stretched back to the dawn of time. His mother, Amarachi, was skeptical at first. But then, Okachukwu began to speak of a prophecy that would change the fate of the village forever. "The kingdom of Ogwashi will fall," he said one day, his voice low and certain, "unless the blood of Ekene, the son of the spirits, is crowned as king." At just 5 years old, Okachukwu began to command the respect of the elders. And so, he was known as Okachukwu the king's heir, a boy destined for greatness. The village of Ogwashi was now home to 5 children, each a living legacy of Ekene. Each one a mirror of his power, his secrets, his bloodline. But what would become of them? Would they follow in their father's footsteps? Or would they be consumed by the very legacy he had left behind? And as each child grew, so did the mystery surrounding Ekene's disappearance. Was he truly gone? Or had he simply left his children behind, waiting for the right moment to return? The winds of Ogwashi have whispered of his return. But time, like the river, moves on, and only the spirits know what lies ahead. It was 5 years to the day since Ekene vanished. The village of Ogwashi gathered for the Festival of Rain, a tradition honoring the spirits of harvest and water. The elders danced, the drummers played, and the people celebrated life. But something different happened this year. As the final drumbeat echoed into the twilight, a thick fog rose from the Nkalu forest, the same forest that bordered the place where Ekene was last seen. The fog rolled slowly, unnaturally, swallowing the edges of the village. And from that fog came a sound, footsteps. No one saw him enter, but by morning, a man was sitting on the sacred rock at the center of Ogwashi. He wore a tattered white robe, faded and stained. His hair had grown wild, his beard thick, but there was no mistaking him. Ekene had returned. The first to see him was a child, Ifeananya the seer. She screamed, not in fear but recognition. "The dream is walking. Father has returned." The village froze. The elders came, hesitant. The mothers gathered their children close. He said nothing at first, just stared at each of the 5 children in turn. His eyes lingered on Chukwudi the Shadow a moment longer. Then finally he spoke. "I am not what you remember." The council of Ogwashi summoned Ekene to speak. He came willingly, calm, his voice deep but weary. He told a tale unlike any heard before. "I did not leave. I was taken." He said that the night before his wedding, he went to the Nkalu forest to bury a charm given to him by an old herbalist, a charm to protect his home from jealousy. But as he dug into the earth beneath the twisted fig tree, The ground opened beneath him. He fell into what he described as the spirit chamber, a hollow place beneath the world, where time stood still and voices of the Ancient Ones spoke. There he met Egbunu, the guardian of fate and shadow. Ekene had unknowingly awakened an ancient prophecy. A prophecy that had slumbered for generations. Egbunu spoke to him. 5 shall be born from 1. Their gifts shall echo the past and shape the dawn. But first, the bearer must vanish. So the earth forgets, and the blood remembers. In that moment, Ekene was given a choice. Return and live a normal life, forgetting the knowledge he was shown, or vanish and become part of the prophecy that would protect the balance of the village, even if it meant abandoning all he loved. He chose the second. But his return now. That was not his doing. Something had disturbed the balance. That night, as the village argued over whether Ekene was cursed or chosen, one of the children, Okechukwu the king's heir, fell into a deep trance. Amarachi screamed when she found him stiff, cold, eyes wide open, whispering ancient Igbo incantations in a voice not his own. The priestess of the village, Mama Idu, was called in haste. She listened to Okachukwu's whispers, her face pale. This is not the child speaking. This is the king of shadows. He is rising. The prophecy is incomplete. Ekene, hearing this, stood and said, He's here. Egbunu is no longer contained. My return was the last seal. The next day, Ekene led the elders, the 5 mothers, and their children to the Nkalu forest. They reached the base of the ancient fig tree where Ekene had last stood 5 years ago. He began to chant softly. The earth trembled. Before their eyes, the ground cracked and revealed a spiral staircase of stone leading down into darkness. No one must enter except the children, Ekene said. They are the keys. The only ones who can undo what was started. Chinyu wept. They are only children. They are more, Ekene whispered. They are fate given form. One by one the children descended into the spiral. Chijioke the healer led with his glowing hands. Ngozi the whisperer murmured softly, guiding the spirits that stirred. Chukwudi the shadow embraced the darkness like a womb. Ifeananya the seer had already seen this moment in her dreams. And Okechukwu walked as if he had done it all before. Down below, they found a chamber of stone, covered in carvings. Carvings that showed 5 children, a man with a broken heart, and a shadow god rising. In the center was a throne. Upon it, a figure cloaked in smoke. Bunu. His voice filled the chamber like a tide. You are born of choice, not sin. But now you must choose again. Bind me, or free me. The children held hands, each one glowing with their own energy. Healing, spirit, shadow, vision, and leadership. They were the prophecy. Together they could seal Egbunu forever. Or free him and risk unleashing a power that even the ancestors feared. But something unexpected happened. Okechukwu broke the circle. He walked toward the shadow. I am not just a key, he said. I am the heir. I am the vessel. Suddenly, the throne burst into black flame. Chamber shook. The other 4 children were thrown back. Ekene, above ground, collapsed, blood pouring from his nose. He's choosing wrong, he gasped. He was never meant to carry it alone. Since the day Okechukwu merged with the spirit of Egbunu, the balance of Ogwashi tilted. Birds stopped singing at dawn. The rivers whispered at night. Trees leaned away from the sun. Ekene, their once proud father, lay sick under the care of Mama Idu. His body growing colder as Okachukwu's power grew stronger. He was tethered to his son, a father's life traded for his child's spirit possession. The other children, Ngozi, Chukwudi, Ifeananya, and Chijioke, kept vigil near the sacred tree, each disturbed by visions. The bond of siblings by fate was splintering. He is no longer Okechukwu, whispered Ngozi. He is something older, something watching us from behind his eyes. The people of Ogwashi feared the child they once worshipped. Okechukwu no longer spoke to anyone. He walked the village barefoot, his skin pulsing with silver veins, eyes clouded by the spirit of Igbunu. Animals bowed when he passed. The wind died. Fires flickered out. And still he said nothing. But Ngozi, whose gift was spirit whispering, began hearing things when he was near. The others must bow or burn. One village is not enough. I remember empires. The river will rise again with blood. These were not the thoughts of a child. They were the memories of a god. One night, Ifunanya the seer had a vision. She stood upon a field of ash. Around her were the remains of Ogwashi. Huts burned, rivers dry, silence complete. Okechukwu stood on a throne of bone. His siblings in chains below. Then she heard a voice from above. Only one can stop the war. But she must betray her own blood. Ifunanya woke in tears. She made a vow. If I must stop him, even if it breaks me, I will. But how do you stop your own brother? One who shares your blood, your purpose, your gift of the gods. Chijioke, the healer, tried to reach Okechukwu in private. Brother, do you remember when we ran through the yam fields? Do you remember Mother's song? Okechukwu turned his eyes, now golden and endless, and said, Chijioke is gone. Only the vessel remains. Do not speak of weakness. Then, in a sudden act of cruelty, Okechukwu raised his hand. Chijioke's feet lifted from the ground as shadow wrapped around his throat. Only Ngozi's scream broke the trance. Okechukwu dropped him. Next time, he said calmly, I will not show mercy. That night, the 4 children met in the Shrine of Stones, a place sacred to the ancestors. He must be stopped, said Chikwudi, before his madness devours the whole land. He is not Ekene's son anymore, Ifunanya whispered. He is Egbunu's heir. The elders of Ogwashi knew the children would eventually clash. They consulted the bone priest of Umakima, a hermit who lived at the crossroads of 3 villages. He arrived, blindfolded, his body painted in ash, and with a voice deep as thunder said, The world is watching. 5 stars were born. 1 fell. Now the 4 must decide. Bind him again or fall as dust beneath his feet. They asked, Can Okechukwu be saved? He answered only this. The god inside him is hungry. And the hunger is older than the forest. The village of Ogwashi split. Some feared Okechukwu and begged the children to submit, let him lead, worship him as the child god of balance. Others stood with Chikwudi, Ngozi, Ifunanya, and Chijioke, those who believed no child should become a tyrant, no matter how divine. The war had no soldiers, only tension. Until one night, something happened that shattered the calm forever. A child named Kamsi, barely 8, had been mocking Okechukwu near the riverbank, calling him the ghost boy. By dawn, Kamsi's body was found wrapped in coils of a black serpent. His skin cold, his mouth agape, his eyes missing. The serpent was nowhere to be found. The message was clear. Okechukwu had declared war. Not with words but with fear. Ifunanya began creating spirit charms made from dried bones and ancestral herbs. Ngozi summoned protective ghosts from the spirit realm. Chijioke worked day and night making healing salves for the village. And Chikwudi, once silent and secretive, stepped fully into his power. He had learned to split into shadows, move unseen, and even enter dreams. One night, he entered Okechukwu's dream. And what he saw chilled him. A throne made of mother's tears. Sky choked with smoke. And at the center, Okechukwu laughing with Ekene's limp body at his feet. Chikwudi woke screaming. There is no redemption now. There is only the storm. Mama Edu, the old priestess, performed one final ritual, the divination of the broken line. She carved 5 symbols into the ground: child, snake, crown, fire, and eye. When she poured blood over the symbols, all bled into one, and the flames rose high. It is time. The gifts must fight. The people of Ogwashi did not sleep the night before the full moon. Every hut was silent, every torch burned low. The elders sat in prayer. The mothers wept into calabashes. At the sacred hill of Omiekwe, the 4 gifted children stood in a circle. Ngozi, spirit whisperer. Ifeanyi, the seer of fates. Chijioke, the healer. Chukwudi, walker of shadows. Each bore the mark of the gods, carved by pain, shaped by destiny. At the center of the hill stood a stone drum, and on it, the bones of the first priest of Ogwashi. It was here Okechukwu demanded they meet him. Alone, his voice had echoed in Chukwudi's dreams, or the river will turn red with villagers. As the full moon reached its peak, a black whirlwind howled up the hill. Trees bent backward. The air turned cold. From the eye of the storm, Okechukwu stepped forward. He no longer looked human. His skin had turned obsidian. His eyes held galaxies of sorrow and rage. A crown of smoke circled above his head. Behind him came whispers, not voices but ancient echoes. Empires lost, cities buried, wars long forgotten. He raised a hand. Kneel and live. Resist and vanish. But none of them kneeled. Without a word, the battle began. Chukwudi disappeared into smoke, appearing behind Okechukwu with twin daggers blessed by ancestors. But as he struck, Okechukwu vanished, only to reappear behind him, blasting him into a tree with pure energy. Ngozi screamed, summoning the spirits of their mothers. Yes, all 5, each woman appearing as a glowing force. For a moment, Okechukwu hesitated. "Mama," his voice trembled. But then his eyes burned brighter, and he unleashed a shockwave that shattered the spirits into dust. Chijioke poured his life into the earth, causing vines to rise and trap Okechukwu's limbs. For a breath they held, but he snapped them like cobwebs. Ifeanyi stood still, her eyes closed, murmuring a prophecy in a forgotten tongue. Okechukwu turned toward her. "You think you've seen the end. I am the end." He raised his hand to strike her down when she opened her eyes. "It is not I who defeats you," she whispered. "It is the final gift." At that moment, a figure stumbled onto the hill, weak, coughing, broken. It was Ekene. He had dragged himself from death's doorstep. His legs bled, his eyes sunken, but he stood, clothed in nothing but a torn cloth and memories. "Okechukwu," he said hoarsely. "My son." Okechukwu froze. For all his godhood, he was still a boy who had longed for his father. "You left us," Okechukwu said. "You ran from your fate." Ekene wept. "I was a coward. Liar. I brought pain to 5 women. And worse, I cursed 5 children. But I returned not to rule, not to beg, but to give." He knelt and placed a blade before him. The blade of Iola, the spirit of judgment. No mortal may touch it and live, unless they do so in pure sacrifice. "Take my life," Ekene said. "End it. Let the pain stop here." For the first time, Okechukwu's hands trembled. Okechukwu stepped forward. The sky thundered. Lightning cracked. He raised the blade and paused. Behind him, the spirits of his siblings stood wounded but firm. Before him, the man who had given him life knelt in surrender. A god faced a choice. "End the pain," a voice inside him whispered, "or become it." Tears fell from Okechukwu's eyes. He dropped the blade and fell to his knees. I don't want this," he whispered. "I never did." The moment the blade hit the earth, rain fell. Warm, cleansing, holy. The black crown vanished. The fire in his veins faded. His eyes turned brown again like a child's. The god was gone. Only a boy remained. Ekene crawled forward and embraced him. "I'm sorry, my son. For the women. For the lies. For your burden. But gods don't leave quietly." As the spirit of Egbunu exited Okechukwu's body, it needed a new vessel. It lunged toward Ifeanyi the seer. But Chukwudi, weak and broken, stepped into its path. "I was always meant to be the secret," he whispered. "Let me be the end." And just like that, Chukwudi screamed once and was gone. The god, bound in him, collapsed into a black stone that sank into the earth. The sky cleared. The war was over. Ekene died a month later. He left no riches, only a story. Chijioke became the village's greatest healer, building a school for lost children. Ngozi became a high priestess, forever guarding the border between spirits and men. Ifeanyi wandered from village to village, telling stories. Her eyes always distant. Okechukwu, now truly mortal, lived simply as a farmer. Quiet, humble. But every year on the night of the full moon, he would light 5 candles. One for his mother, one for his father, one for his brother Chukwudi, one for himself, and one for the gift, the power they all carried, and the lesson they had learned. Power must serve people, not rule them. And so ends the tale of the 5 children born from one man's sins. One who rose too high, one who gave too much, and the rest who found balance between godhood and humanity. This was the legend of Ekene, the cursed lover, of Okechukwu, the godchild, and the children who stopped the sky from breaking. Did this tale move you? What would you have done if you held the final gift? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us. Should we bring you another African legend next week? Like, subscribe, and let the ancestors guide your path.